Hi, Virginia. How are you doing? Welcome.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I'm really excited to be doing this one and all the ones in our series. Um, what is it that made you want to participate in these interviews? Can you
That's
tell us a little?
absolutely, that's a good question. I never really thought about ever telling my story publicly until I saw a newscast. I was caught off guard. The news was going on behind me, and I heard this woman, I believe it was Mary Dispenza, talking about being sexually abused by a nun. And I almost fell over. I was shocked. I whipped around and I was like, oh my God, she's telling my story. I was, whoa, what? I'm sorry. Okay. So I was stunned. I was just staring at this interview, and it was the first time in my life that I didn't feel alone with my story of being sexually abused by a nun.
Yeah.
There was another person that was telling it in public for everyone to know that this happens. And I got a hold of Mary. I went through a lot of people through Snap because I didn't want to talk to somebody who really was talking about men being abused by priests. That wasn't that wasn't the people I wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to her. And finally, they got me in touch with her, and she really helped me get in touch with a support group with women that were abused by nuns. And I decided that it was absolutely pertinent to tell my story so that other people don't feel alone and don't feel so isolated in that experience of their lives. I was very young when I was sexually abused by a nun. It started when I was 14, didn't end until I was 25. But it's a really interesting story. It's just I was raised Irish Catholic. My maternal grandparents came from Ireland when they were 16, came over on the boat and went to Ellis Island. Their name is engraved on Ellis Island. And they ended up living in Detroit. My grandfather was a trolleyman up and down Fort Street, and they had 10 children. And they made a deal because being Irish Catholic and being, they were very, 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 very Catholic. It was important that their children be raised in the church. They couldn't afford St. Gabriel's in Southwest Detroit, so they made a deal with the church that they would launder the sisters' garments, their habits. And my mother was born in 1921, so that was back in the day of the full wool habit. And if you take, there was quite a few sisters at that time. So they had to launder all of the sisters' habits at St. Gabriel's every week. And they had to starch, and it was all wool, and it was all by hand. And they were also pretty much raising the oldest child was helping raise all the other ones. And they did that for their children to be raised in the Catholic Church. At that time, they were taught by sisters. And it was important that their children also be raised in the Catholic Church. And I went to Catholic school from first grade through undergrad college. And I was taught I was taught almost by all nuns. My mom made sure that I was in classes that they were taught by sisters. It was really important for my mom. She did not like lay persons. She wanted sisters. That's why I had me in Catholic school. And my family was middle class. They worked very, very hard to put me through Catholic school because it was very expensive. And I had, I was baptized. I had my first communion. I have all the pictures. I had my first confession. That was odd. I'll never forget that. What was I confessing? But
That's another story.
that is another story, absolutely. But I made the decision to be confirmed, and you can take the girl out of the Catholic Church. You can't take the Catholic Church out of the girl.
I know
it. That is instilled in me to this day. But in middle school, I went to another school that was outside of our parish, and I was bullied for 7th and 8th grade. It was the middle school, and I was not accepted by my peers. And that is very, very detrimental to a child. Now, I was also in a household that was, my father was a sexual predator, unfortunately. He was a pedophile. He was also an alcoholic. And he was an electrician for Local 58. And my mother worked at Ford Motor Company. That's what we do in Detroit. We work for the motor companies. And she worked very, very hard. She had me when she was 40 years old. So my parents were not, they had a housekeeper that raised me. They were pretty much at the age of 40, they really weren't ready to raise another kid. So they had a housekeeper come in. And she was a live-in housekeeper. And she would go home on the weekends, but a lot of people said she was my saving grace for the most part. She left when I was 11 years old to take care of her mom in Florida. So that was a big abandonment issue for me. My heart was broken. That was my first mom. She raised me from, I was 1 month old when she came into our family, and she left when I was 11.
What a heartbreak.
Oh my God. I remember staring into the ditch when she pulled out of the driveway, because I was raised not to cry. I was raised literally not to cry. So I held everything in, and I made it a decision on my own that I was fine by myself. I could handle this. And that same year when I was 11, I was sexually abused by a predator that was seeking out children on a playground behind a church. Being raised the way I was very vulnerable. I was pretty much like a magnet because I was alone a lot of the time growing up. And here I am, this kid all by herself out in the playground, and he decided I was his next one. And he did tell me, he goes, we have to turn our backs to the church because they watch me. So the church knew about him. I do clearly remember him saying that. And he was pushing me on the swing. So I went through a lot of sexual abuse. I was a babysitter. The husband of the family I was babysitting for sexually abused me. It was almost like I had this sign on my head. Vulnerable little girl, take advantage. And when I got to Mercy High School, which was an all-girls college preparatory high school, I was going to change my whole life. I was going to be liked by my peers. I was going to be accepted. I should also kind of include here that I started drinking when I was 9. I grew up in the 60s with a bar in the basement, full bar, and I started drinking when I was 9. I drank every day from the age of 14 to the age of 25, or used some kind of chemical. as a mood alterer. It felt better than hanging out in reality.
Yeah.
I loved the Catholic Church, and when I got to Mercy High School, I loved religious studies. And my first instructor at Mercy was Sister Pat Kulwicki. I confided in her about my past and my history. I confided in her because she was a nun. I thought she was safe. I really thought she was a person of God, and she would be the person that I could trust completely. And I confided in her, and she just took me under her wing.
Yeah.
She's like, and little bit by little bit, what I didn't know is I was being groomed. I was completely being groomed. And she would stay after school to talk to me. She would talk to me after class. She was very empathetic and understanding. And she was the person that was going to help me.
Yep.
She was going to help me. And she gave me her phone number. And I'm like, oh my God, like this teacher gave me her personal phone number. I felt so special. I really did. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm that special kid. She loves me. And she would give me letters, and she would give me cards, and she always remembered special days. And she moved from Farmington to Keagle Harbor, and she's like, would you like to help us move? She actually lived outside of the convent. She lived in an apartment with another person that was a Sister of Mercy. She was a Sister of Mercy. And this is what I don't understand. And I never asked her about this. Like, why didn't she live in the convent with the other nuns? But she lived in an apartment with another woman that just left the sister.
What year was this? What year was this, Virginia?
1975.
I'm sorry, what?
75.
Yeah, I was going to say that there was an era then when they were beginning to move out of large communities and into little houses like that.
Really?
Yes.
So I had no idea. It was Vatican II. There was a lot of changes happening in the Catholic Church.
Yeah. I know that's what the Sisters of Mercy were doing. I don't know if all orders did that, but that community did that pretty universally. They had the option of moving into an apartment.
I had no idea. Well, that helps, because I thought maybe she was lying to the school.
No.
Okay. Because I thought the school would definitely check it out.
It was an experimental living kind of situation or time for the community.
Oh, okay. So she was moving in with a gal named Kathy Schneider, who was a nun she was a nun, but she left the convent, and they moved in together. Pat was still a nun. She was a Sister Pat Kulwicki. That was her full name. And she said, would you like to help us move? You're young, you're strong, and we have a lot of books. And I'm like, oh, I felt so special. You want me to help you move? And I helped them move. And I asked my mom, can I help Sister Pat move? Well, my mom, being raised by nuns, had full trust with this woman.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, full and complete trust. Absolutely, you can help Sister Pat move. And I did do that. And then it got to be where she would invite me to stay overnight. And I did, because my mom said, sure, you can stay overnight at Sister Pat's. That would be fine. And one night, she's like, oh, you've gone through so much in school. I was having quite a difficult time, and she would help me with my classes. She helped me with everything, literally. She helped me cope. She helped me de-stress. She helped me figure things out. She didn't make any comment about me using marijuana or our group using marijuana. She would make jokes about it. She would be, her favorite was, put that in your pipe and smoke it. And I'm like, sure, I'll put that in my pipe and smoke it. I don't have a problem with that. And one
Did
evening,
she supply it, by the way? Did she supply the marijuana or the alcohol?
She did supply alcohol. Yes, she did. I don't think she knew where to get weed, but she taught me Nostrovia because she was Polish.
Oh, okay.
She did teach me the salute. But this one evening, she was massaging my shoulders because I was stressed out. She goes, "Here, let me come on over here, and I'll rub your shoulders." And she was rubbing my shoulders, felt really good, and then it went to my breasts. And then she was rubbing my chest, and then that was the beginning of the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And that went on. She ended up giving me a mitzvah coin, if you know what that is. It's coins that are cut in half, and then it just said on the back of it, "The Lord watch between me and thee while one is absent from the other."
Yes.
And I just felt so blessed to have that, because it was like she was always praying for me that I would be okay and I would be safe. And we, it was that bond, it was, I never had anybody in my corner like that in my life.
Yeah.
And it continued. What I didn't know, and this was happening behind my back, she had called my mother and asked for a loan of about $6,000. And she and my mom, what they were doing, they were communicating back and forth. And my mom asked her to watch over me, because my mom knew I was kind of a wild child, and she really couldn't keep tabs on me. I would leave the house and my mom would say, "Where are you going?" "Nowhere." "What are you doing?" "Nothing." So to my mom, my middle name was going nowhere and doing nothing. So she left it up to Pat to watch me, because I was basically always over there. But then she asked, Sister Pat asked for a loan, because being the poor nun that she was and didn't really have a lot of money, needed furniture for her apartment. And all of a sudden, all this new furniture showed up at the apartment. And one was a big hide-a-bed. It was beautiful furniture. I knew nothing about the money transaction between her and my mom. It wasn't until years later that, and I was a full-blown addict alcoholic through this, because one, I couldn't tell anybody about this relationship I was having.
Yeah, right.
The group that I got attached to in high school were the burnouts, because we loved and accepted everybody.
Yeah.
And my main goal, mandated by my mother, was that I graduate high school. Well, I was so, emotionally, I was a basket case. So Pat was helping me through that, bottles of wine, that helped. I mean, at that time, I was 14 to the age of 18. I got arrested once, and they came and bailed me out. So, I didn't have to call my parents. They did come and help me tell my parents. So they were always in the background. Like Pat was always in the background. What I didn't know that my mother and Pat had an alignment, while all the while Pat was sexually abusing me every night. And I felt loved. I didn't know it was sexual abuse. I really didn't, because I grew up with that.
Your mother probably did not realize that she was being groomed as well.
Yes, my mom had no idea. My mom had no idea. None. And I felt like I couldn't get out of this relationship. I know that sounds insane, but I felt like there was some kind of weird super glue. I couldn't understand why. I couldn't understand what was happening with me. I would try to have other relationships and couldn't. And she would give gifts, she would give cards, she would, you know, there were times when, I mean, she was abusive. She was very abusive in sexual relations. It was horrifying what she did to me. It was absolutely horrifying what she did to me. And who am I going to tell? There were teachers that asked me, is there something going on between you and Pat?
Were these teachers nuns?
No, they were lay people. They were lay people because one was a art. She was my art teacher, and she's like, you guys are something. You guys are always together. Like, see, she started to figure things out, and I was like, I got scared. I got real scared. I'm like, oh no, because you should never get a nun in trouble. I mean, I was so brainwashed.
Yeah.
I went into a drug and alcohol treatment facility when I was 25. I went to Brighton Hospital, and I got clean and sober. I saw a therapist initially, a wonderful therapist, and she was aghast about this relationship. I mean, she was just like, oh my God. You've been calling a door a file cabinet your entire life. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You've been calling a door a file cabinet your entire life, and you have not known that. She goes, do you want to stay in this relationship? I said, absolutely not. No, I don't. She brought Pat in for couples counseling.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she brought her in, and she asked her, she goes, she saw us separately, and she knew my point of view was to leave, but I didn't feel like I could leave because I was scared of what Pat was going to do. And then my therapist, Debbie, asked Pat, do you want to stay in this relationship? And she said, absolutely. And she brought us back in, and basically it's just like, you know what? Virginia doesn't want to stay in this relationship at all. So I told her that, and I said, we're done. This is done. Today is the day. We're done here. She said, if that happens, I will commit suicide. My heart flipped. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be responsible for this woman's death. And she left the room, and because it was an 1.5-hour session, this happened in the first half hour. It was quick. She sat outside of that office. There were steps going down. She sat on the steps waiting for me to come out. I just walked right by her and left her sitting there. When she said that, Debbie gave her the card to suicide prevention, and she said, if that's your plan, if that's your intention, please call this number. Get some help as soon as possible. And thank God for the therapist, Debbie Rubianis. She was absolutely amazing. And she talked me down off of that little ridge. She's like, no, you are not responsible for anybody's suicide. Absolutely not. And it was after that that I processed a lot of what had happened. And I decided on my own that I needed to go to Mercy High School and tell the principal what had happened. I was young and naive and all that good stuff. And that's when the principal at that time, she had a meeting with me, and I told her my experience of high school, my entire high school experience, plus to the age of 25. And she goes, I'm really sorry to hear that. She goes, but why did you stay so long? Now, Pat was still working at Mercy High School. She was still working there at that time. I decided to tell my mom. I told my mom a couple weeks before I confronted the principal. My mom was so angry. She was so angry over what had happened. And right before that, you know, I was looking through my mom's Bible, and I did find a letter from Pat to her talking about the $6,000, talking about the furniture, talking about, she never repaid that money. She never repaid that money.
How could she? Yeah. She would never have. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. My mom went 2 weeks before I went to the principal's office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon during the weekday, when all the girls are up near the administration office, right? Because they're all getting ready to go home and go on the buses and everything else. And my mom started screaming hysterically to the principal.
Good for her.
Yeah, she just went off. You have to know she's 100% Irish. And she has
Mama bear, yeah.
She's got a temper. And she went off on the principal. And they brought Pat in. She of course, the principal's like, come on back to my office. She was trying to get her away from the desk. She's like, oh my God. Brought her back to her office. And my mom explained, my mom was hot. She could have tattooed somebody. And she's like, let me go get Pat. Let me go get Pat Kowicki, and we'll talk. We'll ask her about this. They brought Pat in, and Pat said, oh, you know, Virginia's very troubled. She was a very troubled adolescent. You know, she was an addict, she was an alcoholic, and she was very mentally unstable. And I don't know where all this is coming from. It's all lies. She's a very ill individual. And the principal believed it. My mom was, she's like, my mom was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They didn't.
When was this? This is the what, in the 80s maybe? Late 70s or early 80s?
It was 1980. Yeah, it was right around 1986.
Yeah. So nothing of this kind of thing had even begun to be public, right?
No, 1986.
So the nuns did not feel threatened by the truth.
No, not at all.
What arrogance,
and
yeah.
When I went to confront the principal, she looked at me and she goes, you do understand your mother caused a big ruckus here about 2 weeks ago. I said, did she? She goes, she was screaming.
Your mother never told you this? She just never said it to you?
She didn't tell me she blew up. She told me she went to talk to the principal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She didn't tell me the ins and outs. She didn't tell me the whole thing. So, yeah. But I wanted my mom to know what had happened. And she was shocked. You know, my mom was just couldn't believe it. And I did find the letter about the, you know, and that's when she told me, she goes, you know, Pat never did pay me back that money. She goes, and my mom said, she goes, I trusted that woman. I trusted that woman.
Your mother was victimized. The whole family dynamic. You're victimized. Yeah. She's victimized. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and interestingly enough, you know, as crazy as it was, because I always felt this thread of connection to Pat. That this is like the silver thread that always kind of hooked into my soul.
Yeah.
And she died of a massive heart attack in 1994. I did go to the funeral home. And the strangest thing happened. It was, I believe, a power move by the principal, because half of Mercy High School was there. You know, she was a teacher there. And when you go up to the casket, there's a kneeler there for Catholics to be able to say their prayers.
Right.
The principal knelt down right next to me. Didn't say a word, but I knew it was a power move. Basically for me to keep my mouth shut about anything that I told her about. I could feel it.
Yeah.
And she could touch my elbow. That was the weirdest thing. I've never at a funeral home ever had somebody come up next to me on a kneeler.
Mm-hmm.
That's sacred space. You let people have their space and time with the deceased.
Right.
Oh no, not her. Pat's brother, because I became the family knew me. I was always around the family, her brother, and her brother wanted a woman to be, because Pat was very, woman oriented, wanted to lift women up as much as she could. Her brother asked me to be a pallbearer. And knowing the family, and out of respect for the family, and knowing how important that was to her brother, I went ahead and was a pallbearer. It was really a way of me to really say goodbye, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was important for whatever reason. It was important for me to do that. But on the flip side, I was scared to death that they were going to find out this information.
Oh yeah.
I was still trying to protect her.
Yeah.
And I knew she kept a diary. I knew she kept a journal, because it was a journal I gave her. It was a leather-bound journal with an oak tree carved on it. One of those really beautiful journals with the oak tree carved in the leather. And she wrote all about me in it. And I was scared to death that her family was going to find that and read it, because it was pretty intimate details. And I'm like,
so you were still protecting her. You were still,
as crazy as that
you
is.
still had a grasp on you. Yes.
Yes.
And of
absolutely.
course, by now that's a pretty normal scenario for the abnormality of it all. It's important that you know that happens. That's the whole manipulative way that they keep their claws in you.
Yeah.
But when you're going through it, you don't know this is normal, and there are many others that,
I had no idea, Kat. I had no idea.
Right.
And I told her brother, and I said, look, you got to get into her bookshelf. You got to find this journal and burn it. Don't look at it. Please don't look at it. Just burn it.
Did they do that? Do you know?
I have no idea. Literally, I don't know. Never been in contact after that, but
That could be why.
What really startles me is that her roommate, and this is where I get angry, because her roommate saw what was going on. She walked in on us once. She walked into the living room and saw us once.
Were they having a relationship?
I don't know. They lived in 2 different bedrooms in the apartment.
Okay.
That I don't know. But she saw what was going on, and she moved out. The following week, she just packed up, and I have to go. I have to move out. And I, in my young head, it's like, well, that's convenient.
Yeah. You can bet she recognized it from having been in the convent. I mean, I once said to the sisters that I spoke with about it, I said, you can't be in the convent more than 2 weeks without knowing who's courting whom. It happens. And in that era, now I don't know what they're doing now. They might be training nuns to be a little more savvy, sexually aware of themselves.
Yeah.
But back then, there was no talk about this kind of thing. And, you know, you went through novitiate, and you were not going to be talking about your own sexual immaturity and eventual maturity, the needs. That never comes up. But
Right.
you saw things going on. And if you went in there without having this clear in your head,
Mm-hmm.
you saw what was going on. And you were either going to stay and play, or you're going to run like hell, you know.
Right.
Or you're going to, you know, you're going to have integrity and live as a chaste nun, the way you promised.
Exactly.
But it does go on in the convent, and it's one of the reasons I left, you know. So yeah, you do see
Pat had left. She started. The Polish nuns, the Felicians. She started as a Felician because her parents were from Poland. Yeah. So she thought that would be very appropriate.
Yeah.
So she was a Felician. She lasted a very short period of time. She told me a lot about being a Felician, about the ceremonies and about she told me a lot. And she did tell me that she would hear in the stairwells the other women that were having relationships in the stairwell. So she knew that was going on in the convent. Some reason she had moved so many times to different convents. So she was a Felician. Then she moved to being a Dominican. Then she basically went into pretty much all of the sisterhoods, is what I call them, until she landed. She said she didn't get along with them. They locked her out of the convent if she wasn't back by like 8 o'clock. They would lock her out of the convent. She said she didn't get along with them, and that's why she had moved so many times to different what do you call them, sisterhoods or
religious orders or communities.
She moved to different religious orders. So she moved about 3-4 times until she ended up being a mercy. And then at one point, and she didn't make a big thing of it, she told me very nonchalantly, she said, I left the Sisters of Mercy today. I left the sisters. And she said, now at school, you're gonna recognize that Pat anymore. They're gonna be calling me just Pat. And I never questioned it. I thought she left the sisterhood because of me. Of course, it was all about me.
Well, you were young, sure.
But I thought I was very young. I was very, very young. Emotionally, I was very, very young.
Yeah. And
really needed attention. And she gave it to me. And she groomed me with that. And that's where I really want others to know that they're not alone. The grooming process is one of reaching out and caring and showing love and attention to those folks that came from very dysfunctional households for the most part.
Right. Or families who were not aware that their children had been molested. There were innocent parents involved as well at times. They groom, and it comes across as courtship, and in a way it is courtship, but it's court in your case as it was in mine. They're ephebophiles. They're drawn to youth who are post-pubescent youth, and from what I was taught by Richard Cait when I confided in him about it, he said these are men or women who are sexually immature themselves, they couldn't relate to a mature adult in a sexual relationship. So they're experimenting the way teenagers do with teenagers. They're emotional peers in that sense. You know, so for them, this is very natural, and it could be love, even though it's perverted and it's criminal, you know, in addition to being sinful in the church. But it's, but for them, in their head, in their little universe, they love you. You know, they love. And boy, that's dangerous, because a youth wants to be loved and, like you say, feel special. And you know,
and I know I wasn't alone. I know I wasn't alone.
Reaction is normal.
Because she started, I got jealous because she moved her attention to a peer of mine who was younger than me.
There you go. Yeah.
And she, I felt so like jilted.
Yeah.
I became suicidal. I mean, it was just like, oh my God. Then she told me that she spent the night over at her apartment because she needed to be comforted. She had endured a loss and needed to be comforted.
So you knew what that meant.
Oh yeah, I knew what that meant. Yeah.
But there's no conscience in a person like this. And you know, I guess what I'm hoping that will eventually I may not live to see anything good come of all of our efforts, but I'm hoping that the sisters themselves will be challenged to be transparent and honest about this. These are, in our generation now, these nuns have been pointing the fingers at bishops through the past 30 years. Oh, they don't take care of the pedophiles and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, some of the sisters have been raped by priests. And so that's become the big deal. They have to look at their own criminals within their own ranks.
Absolutely.
You know, and stop this sisterhood that is protecting an evildoer. It would be like someone in the family protecting the incest going on, you know.
Yes.
To me, it's a, every victim's going to have a different task for healing. Mm-hmm. And some are not going to give a crap about the nuns, and I get that. That's understandable.
Sure.
Someone like yourself who grew up in the church, loving the faith.
Yes. Yes.
And we tended, and I think most Catholics do, we tend to equate the faith and the church as one.
Yes.
So it takes us many years to distinguish, here's the faith, there's God, here's the faith, and here's the church that's supposed to help us live it, right?
Yes.
And sometimes, those who are trying to, or supposed to help us are so screwed up, they have no idea really what the faith is. They're not committed to it. They're committed to a convenient life where they can be predators.
Absolutely.
So it's a struggle. It's no surprise that most victims don't come forward until their middle age.
Yes. I did talk to an attorney.
Yeah.
And he looked at the law in the state of Michigan. And, when you talk about restorative justice, because I've heard you talk about that.
That's my thing. I don't impose that.
I've heard it, around restorative justice, but I really, really wanted to take the Sisters of Mercy to task.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to take the Sisters of Mercy to task. And unfortunately, Michigan has a law that if you don't report, that you cannot, you can't file a lawsuit against them. And I'm like, 5 years. He's like, there's certain things that are trying to change, but I see a lot of these lawsuits in regards to the Boy Scouts, and I'm like, why can they do it?
State. Yeah.
Right.
Each state has their own legal system with that, and that's unfortunate. New York State, where my lawsuit has been filed, they just lifted that statute of limitations. I think they increased the number, but they opened a window for a year excuse me, and I think with COVID, they've extended it now. But I waited. I never thought I'd see the window open the way it was in other states. So Michigan may follow suit eventually. And
yeah, he did say that. He's like, things are changing. He was looking. He was in New York. He was checking that whole situation out when it was occurring.
yeah, yeah.
You know, he's like, it's a possibility that Michigan may do that in the future.
Yeah.
We shall see. But you know, I'm going at 60 years old.
Oh, I know. I get it. I was 68 when it changed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So there's hope. I never thought I'd see that happen, and I actually said to the nuns about 20 years ago, I said, when it changes, I'll see you in court.
Ah, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, my reasoning for it is, as I said, restorative justice, but that doesn't mean that it is not legitimate anger. I mean, this is a crime.
Yes,
It's a crime that was committed against you. And there should be no statute of limitations on sexual abuse because of the psychology involved.
Yep.
Nobody deals with it until they're old enough to understand what happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before that, they just see it as a relationship in the sense of a romantic thing. Well, that'd be fine if she had been 15 years old,
Exactly.
And then it would be two kids experimenting. Yeah. Yeah, it's when you say take the Sisters of Mercy to task, what do you mean about that? What would you like to see happen now with them?
Well, I would like to be compensated financially. I don't have any problem on the planet with that at all.
Right. Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
And I will tell my story, and I will consistently tell my story.
Good for you.
I will put it out there, and absolutely, that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
If and when I ever, sit down and meet with the principal of Mercy again, which she has invited.
Is that original principal still alive?
No, she has retired. I believe she's dead. She died about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much everybody's dead. I mean, Pat's dead.
That's what happens. Yeah, the church has a way of outliving us and the events, and they just move on. They kind of depend on us dying first, all of us.
Yeah. But her rhythm
the Sisters of Mercy have changed over the years in this way. I don't know what the Michigan group was back in the 70s. The Mercy Order was founded in Dublin, right?
Yeah.
When it came to this country, it was not a unified community, right? They had the same, they lived by the rule and all, but many of them were individual, like autonomous groups in a diocesan area. They were geographic groups. So you might, where I was, it was the Brooklyn Sisters of Mercy. Then you had the Albany Mercies. You had different mercies.
Oh, okay.
Now, half of the order in the country, I'm not sure if it was half, but a good size of it, was unionized. That was the big joke. They were members of the union.
No.
And that meant they were one large group all over the country.
Okay.
And, and so they had like provinces or whatever. And then the rest of the Sisters of Mercy all over the country were individually governed. They were not related other than by their foundress and the spirit of mercy that they lived.
Mr. McCauley.
Yeah, right. And they all took the same vows. They took 4 vows: poverty, chastity, obedience, care of the poor, sick, and ignorant.
Yes.
And so the spirit of mercy was all the same, but their structure was different, right? Now, in the past, I don't know, 20 years or so, I don't know when they joined, but now they're all members of the union, right?
Oh.
So, yeah. So when we filed our lawsuit, it was against the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, right?
Right.
Now, the reason I say that is when that happens, you're not just dealing with the locals of your area in Michigan. You would be dealing with them as well, but they're not going to be the same people. Most of them are dead.
Yeah.
But the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas and their general, whatever they have, chapter or whatever they do, council, that's who you're going to be dealing with when the time comes. So it's a different group, and not one of them will probably know who you're talking about. They won't even have heard of this person.
No.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's quite a few people. I know the person I've been talking with at Mercy, because for whatever reason, a lot of folks were alumna
Yeah.
of Mercy.
Yeah.
He happens to be an alumnus of Mercy. And there are a lot of instructors. Granted, they're about to retire. And her roommate is still alive. And I know where she lives because I've spotted her on Facebook. She lives not that far from me in Royal Oak, Michigan.
We'll have to share this.
Right, yes. She lives in Royal Oak, Michigan, and she's married to a woman, which go figure, you know?
Well, you know, I mean, that's honest, I think.
Absolutely.
Because that was part of the problem that I saw while I was in the convent. That, you know, many of the people who joined years ago who were lesbian look at it through compassion and, you know, human nature here.
Yeah.
They had nowhere they could be safe in generations gone by. So a convent was a safe place to function in the person that they were. The difficulty comes, particularly now when we're a little more kind of vocal about what we think, how we live. The difficulty now is the church demands celibacy and chastity, not just not being married as a celibate, but chaste, no sexual activity whatsoever. So, you know, whether you're straight or gay as priest, or whether you're lesbian or straight as a nun, the contract you make, if you both agree to the same things, it means no sexual activity. It doesn't mean you have a haven for sexual activity now. You know? But that's the kind of sexual maturity and training that needs to be done in formation. You know, it should have been done all through the years, but who the heck talked about sex back then? Nobody. Not at home, not in church, nowhere. No. My husband used to tell me when they taught about sex in his seminary, the class was in Latin. So if you weren't fluent in Latin, you weren't getting Latin, you weren't getting taught. But that was over in the Vatican. But, you know, I mean, to me, it would be more honest for those who are lesbian, get out, get married now that you can. And I understand that's only recent.
Yeah.
Because those of us who were straight had to get out to get married. I couldn't bring a husband into the convent with me.
Nope. That wasn't going to happen.
No. But, you know, I mean, so we're in a new generation, and it's, I think, a new opportunity for the Mercies. And I have a deep affection for that order.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Mother Macaulay had a vision that was so godly and beautiful. I know I prayed at her grave 3 times before ever moving forward with this. To me, it's a beautiful order with a beautiful charism, and I want to see it purged of all of this stuff. And the way I put it, be the vanguard in this effort to reform it. You know,
I mean, there were some sisters that I dearly believe that they represented everything the sisters stood for.
Yes.
Hands down.
Oh, yes.
Hands down.
Yes.
Hands down. And I love the Sisters of Mercy and everything that they stood for. My God, I went 4 years. You can't not be a part of that. Growing up in a Mercy High School,
oh yes, once you hear about Mother Macaulay, yes, Mother Macaulay's part of your life once you hear about it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you're Irish, I mean that's again. I grew up in an Irish neighborhood, and yeah, well, you know, when I was in the convent, this was funny. Our novitiate time, I was the only novice who entered the year that I entered, and so they were used to having 30 a year, generation before me. And now there was 1 or 2 maybe, but I was the only one that year. So they joined a portion of the novitiate training with the Josephites and the Dominicans, and we all pulled and lived together and studied together. It was great fun for us.
Oh my God.
But when we would be talking, one of the Dominicans said to me one day, "Who is this Catherine McCauley you're always talking about?"
Oh
And I said, "Catherine McCauley, she's the founder of the order." And she said, "Oh, I thought it was one of the sisters in your convent back in Brooklyn." She said, "You all talk about her as though she's a living person." And
absolutely.
yeah, and that's how it was. And my parents, the same way. My parents, they prayed for her canonization, and
Oh
and
yeah.
so yeah. I mean, that to me it's a beautiful. Heck, Catherine McCauley was on the money in Ireland. She's a saint, and I have wept tears over this whole issue
Hmm.
regarding the Sisters of Mercy because of my love for Macaulay and the good nuns that are part of that,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But that doesn't excuse it. What it does is it demands that they live up to the vision that was presented.
Yes.
But what are you going to do now? What are you going to do about this? Do you have any ideas in your head where to go with it?
At some point, I do want to go talk to the principal, but I'm learning not to go alone.
Right.
I'm learning some things. After that, I'm not real sure, Kat. I'm
Yeah.
real sure.
Have you, how have you experienced the benefit of, or if it is a benefit, of the support group that's there? How has that helped?
Yes. It's such it's wonderful to come together as a group of people that can understand
Yeah.
my history, that I'm okay, I'm great, I am an asset to the world, and
Yes.
we can support each other no matter what comes our way.
Yes.
We're all okay. And
Yeah.
what I experienced was not outside the nine dots, that other people experienced it. And it's not abnormal to have been there for 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can bet there were other sisters who did suspect this. They did. I have no doubt. But that's water under the bridge right now, especially if they're all dead. They can't come forward and say sorry. But this restorative justice, a monetary compensation, it's only money, but it's important because that's what we use in life.
My my mom worked so hard.
Yeah.
And so did my father. But, it was instilled in my mother that I go to Catholic school. And she also had to pay the public school taxes.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
And for her to pay that money, and part of it is restorative justice for her.
Yeah. Is your mom still alive with you?
No, she passed in 99. Both my parents are passed.
Okay.
And she unfortunately, she died of hemochromatosis, complications of hemochromatosis, which is Irish and African Americans get it.
Yeah.
The overload of iron.
Yeah. So strong.
Yes, but and part of that is it was a lot of money. It was an amazing amount of money.
In those days, yeah.
4 years of high school. Never mind the $6,000 that she looked at. Like absurd.
$6,000 in those days was anywhere from a full year's salary to a half a year's salary.
Yeah,
Back then.
absolutely.
For the average person, I'm saying, if they weren't professionals. But in addition to the money spent by them, tuition and all, one of the things that needs to be considered is how this entire event in these years affected you as a person, interfered with your maturity, your growth, your education, your focus, your goals.
I was in therapy for 12 years.
Yeah. So you have the expense of therapy, even if it was paid for, there's an expense incurred there. but there's also what was going on in your head during those years that prevented you from maybe doing other things. What would you have been, Virginia, had this not happened to you?
Yeah, exactly. That's the big question, Kat. That is the big question. I was wondering that the other day, and it's like, if this
Yeah.
all didn't happen,
Yeah, yeah,
if somebody said something early on, like that roommate,
yeah.
if somebody stood up and said something,
Saved you.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
paying attention. And that's what people need to do. They need to pay attention, and they need to have the guts
Yep.
to step up. And for my mom to come in and say that, and for them to believe Pat, this is the absurdity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked there for another 12 years. I mean, it was absurd.
Wow.
But
Wow.
she continued to work, and they believed the teacher? Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
It was a different world. They got away with doing that then. They wouldn't dare do that today. They wouldn't dare do it today. If someone came in and made a stink like your mom made, God bless her. Yeah, it would be a whole different thing. But, that's not to say our lives are wasted. No, so there's a fine line there.
No.
We can all look back and say, I would have done this. If this hadn't happened, you come to I may have done this. I definitely would have. My husband was very harsh on me with this. He said, I'll tell you what you would have done. Here's what you would have done. And he named the gifts and talents that he knew I had and the opportunities that I let go because I had no self-esteem, no self-confidence. And I didn't think I could ever succeed because of it. I have yet to finish college because I was scatterbrained. I couldn't focus, and I didn't think I was smart because she told me I wasn't. But be that as it may, whatever we could have been, we weren't.
Right. Exactly.
So I think we're given the grace on a different level. We're doing this now, and this is good.
Yep. Thank you so much for doing these interviews, and they are so helpful to so many people.
It's so important what you say, that nobody else feels that they're alone. That's my motive as well. That I know what it was like before I ever told anyone, before I ever told my husband, before I told my mother. My mother was, she was almost 80 when I told her.
Wow.
And like your mom, she was a bear. And she got after me. And she said, okay, now she hands me the Brooklyn tablet, the Catholic paper. And she says, now go after them. Here's the address and the number. But the sorrow a mother feels, that I'll never forget. Because her first question to me was, where was I? Why didn't I know this? The nun was in our house, everything you've just described. Why didn't I know this? Well, you didn't know because you trusted her, because we were good Irish Catholics, and we had them on pedestals. We trusted their holiness. But the sorrow
to the cottage. We invited Pat to the cottage.
Oh yeah, mine too. Right? They came on vacation. She came on vacation with them.
Oh yeah.
But how sad for the parents to know this. I hear and imagine your mom being there and what she must have felt. And I have often said, if anyone touched my daughter in any inappropriate way, I would be in jail for life.
I would too.
Yeah, I would absolutely be in jail for life. So it's that's not a good thing to tell your kids, by the way, because then they're afraid to tell you.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't tell my father because he once said, I'd kill anybody who hurt you. I was like,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you don't realize how that can affect a kid. And in all sincerity and honesty, the child is protecting the parents as well as protecting the nun. So that's too much for a kid to have to handle.
Yeah, I had so much anxiety telling my mom. Oh my God. Yeah.
Sure, of course. So is there anything that you think the nuns should be doing right now about this? About you specifically or generally?
You know, I'm not exactly sure how the whole structure is, but, you know, independent living clearly wasn't working.
No supervision.
There was absolutely no supervision. And I think that's why she moved from convent to convent.
Yeah,
I
they caught on to it.
highly suspect
Yeah.
that they booted her out.
Yes. Yeah.
You're a problem child. You need to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But set a precedence, for God's sakes. It's not acceptable. You don't get to ruin entire. I mean, my life. I'm almost 60 years old, for God's sakes. So no, that is not fair. You don't get to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. And believe the children. Believe if somebody steps up and says something, investigate it
Yes.
fully. Fully.
Yes.
There were so many people that I could have told them to interview this person, interview this person, interview that person. I guarantee you they will tell you a different story.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And people either suspect or it's pretty self-evident. How can you go through school with a teacher having a miss a coin and the student having a miss a coin and nobody puts two and two together? Come on.
Yeah. Well, she probably kept that private, you know.
Oh, no, she had it hanging right here.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, she's brazen. Yeah. Now, this other child that she came on to, your peer, do you know that person today?
I don't. I know she lives in Arizona.
Okay.
She was at the funeral.
Oh, my God. Oh, my Lord. That tells you right there.
I believe she played the guitar
Yeah, sure.
and
Yeah.
sang a song.
Well, if she's lucky, we might meet her in our group.
Exactly.
You know, so you know, that's another reason we want to do these interviews and let people know the details as much as we're comfortable sharing, and that they're not alone, because there's no one going to hear your story who's not going to be able to say something is ringing a bell with me too. You know, I mean, as a victim. So it's going to help
Absolutely.
people to come forward.
Yep. Yep. There was another gal actually when she lived in Jackson. She's like, you know, an old friend of mine is going to come visit. Her name's Kelly. Well, Kelly was a full-blown alcoholic. Kelly and I hit it on. We were just like, oh my God. She was a few years older than I was. And she hit a light post going over to Pat that she got so annihilated before she saw Pat at her apartment. There was a reason this woman got drunk.
Yeah, of course. She was from a previous religious order.
Exactly. Yes.
That other experiences.
Yes.
Oh Lord. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So
Well,
hopefully I run into her too, you know, and hopefully she's sober now. But
yeah. Well, you know, I mean, feel free. Well, we can talk about it later, but we're going to circulate all of these interviews, and hopefully, you know, it will help people feel comfortable enough to approach you or Mary Dispenser, any of us in the group, and know that it's done in confidence. You know, that everything is going to be respected, and we take care of each other.
well, yes, we do. Thank you so much for the interview, Kat. I certainly appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I'll see you around the net. All right. Thanks so much. We'll sign off now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching our second video through to the end. I'm very grateful to Virginia for participating in this, and I invite you to come back and watch the future videos. We will have a few more this week, and hopefully more as people come forward to speak. Thank you. Please pray for all the survivors and pray for the abusers. Thanks.
Silent sisters, secrets keep, while victims cry at bishops' feet. You